Okay, Kailin, starting out with the hard-hitting questions. When you first joined DLDNation, your goal was X, and now talking to me after X number of years being on the team, you've actually gotten Y. So you joined DLDNation because of this, but now you actually have that. What are those this and that's?
I mean, do you want like the quick hit answer, or you want me to dive into it a little bit?
Hey, we're on Shots to the Dome. We got to go deep.
We gotta go deep. Okay. So I feel like I joined DLD like with a very common goal. I wanted to lose weight. I wasn't happy with where my body was at. Like it actually came from, so if we're gonna go down the time warp, I was on a med called Accutane, and it made me gain, it's a very harsh med, very harsh. So it made me gain 20 pounds in like a couple of months. Like I just like blew up.
That's
And for a
wild.
person, yeah, so for a person of like my stature, I just got wider. Like it was just like there was nowhere else to go.
For people listening, how old, or not how old, how tall are you?
I'm 5'2.5", 5'3".
Okay, so that's where you're coming from as far as like the 20 pounds. It didn't
Yes.
have a lot of places to go.
Yes. So I just kind of like expanded like horizontally. And so I had like started touching the gym a little bit in college, nothing crazy, but like was lightly into it. And I started this med like right after college. And so when I started gaining all this weight, I was like, okay, well, like I kind of know how to work out. I know my way around the gym at least. And so I was like, let me get certified as a personal trainer so that I can know the ins and outs and kind of like help my body get through this harsh med. Like, and when I say harsh, like you have to get your labs drawn every month. You have to check your liver levels to make sure you're not like deteriorating. You cannot drink on this med. It actually, and I don't say this lightly, but like it has a very high risk of suicide. Like this med is like very, very people, it's a warning on the box. Like people have committed suicide like on this med.
I'm
But it's,
guessing you took it for acne as well, not to cut
yes,
you
it's,
off.
yes, it's supposed to be for
Because
your acne.
also,
Um,
I don't know if Accutane's recommended much anymore because that was something as a kid. I had a ton of acne, and they kept saying to my mom, like, well, there's Accutane. And she knew about all of mainly the depression side effects. And she was like, I don't know if, I'm really ready for that, or like my son's ready for that. Like, we'll just kind of deal with it. And so it's interesting, in addition to all of those sort of maladies that come along with it, there's also weight gain. So did it fix your acne? Like, I guess that's a question.
So this is the thing. Yeah, you actually have to like qualify to be on this med. So it's not like your first line of defense. Like you have to try everything. And I did. I tried topical, I tried antibiotics, I tried like different face washes. I tried drinking more water. I tried changing my sheets all the time. I tried like literally just down the rabbit hole of like I tried everything and nothing was working. And so last straw, my doc or my derm was like, okay, well, you could try this. And at the time, they were like, it has, a pretty good chance of clearing your acne. Now, in retrospect, it actually only has like a 50% like success rate, which sucks. I was like, I just went all through all that. I'm like, okay. So it took away like my severe acne, but like I still had to do stuff for my skin now to like make it okay. So I don't know if it was like worth all the hassle, but yeah, so you have to like qualify for this med. So I was on this med having horrible side effects and just like gaining all this weight. So then I got certified as a trainer. I was like, well, I can like get myself through this. And so I was training people in the gym, getting them results, but like I still was like going up in weight, and I was still getting wider, and I was still like, I would take a sip of water and like blow up. And I was like, oh my God. So it actually like spun me into this cycle of like super negative about my self image, about the gym, about food. Like, because I couldn't, no matter what I was eating, I was still gaining weight. It just like got me into this cycle of like, anything I do, it's hopeless for me. Like, it's weird. It's not going to work. So, um, it's funny then joining DLD. So, because that's like where I was before I joined DLD. And had like started counting macros, like started doing all these things. And I was at the point where I was on night shift as a nurse. I was working 3, maybe 4 days a week, and then training people the other 3 or 4 days a week. So a full 7-day a week schedule. I was beating myself up. I was sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. Cause again, on night shift, when you want to wake up the next day, you just get right back up. Your body wants to be up with the sun. Like it was just crazy. And then on top of it, I had that negative mindset cycle. So like I was just like spinning myself into the ground. And fun fact, me and Coach Holly are friends from home. And so I remember one time I texted her because I was adjusting my own macros. I was like, I'm going to drop again because like I need to. It's not working. I'm not losing any weight. And I texted her. I was like, hey, can you just like, I know you know how to count macros. Like, can you just check my math on this? Make sure I'm like doing this proper drop. And she's like, hey, Kailin, she's like, listen, you know, friend to friend, she's like, I see how hard you've been trying and like how hard you've been working. And I know you're not getting anywhere. And I know you're getting so frustrated. And she's like, I know you know a ton, but maybe she's like, I have a coach, I'm on this team. And she's like, I'm not going to force you, but like, why don't you just take a look at this girl, Dayla? Like no commitment. I'm not gonna do like I'll check your math. Your math looks good. If you want to keep on going, go ahead. But she's like, it was more like she could tell I was just like gassed out. Like I was like, I don't know what else to effing do. And so I had no idea what DLD was. I had no idea who Dayla was. And I
And what year
remember
was this? Just to put like a year on it.
20. So I become a trainer in 2018, and at 2020, right before COVID. Like beginning of 2020, this is when it happened. And I first like stumbled upon Dayla's page. So this was like literally right before pandemic, and we'll get into that. But yeah, so I remember I was like, fine, like this is stupid. I was like, I'm a coach already, so I'm gonna look dumb if I get a coach. So I'm probably not gonna do this, but I'll look. And naive little me, for everyone listening, like it is never dumb to get a coach on anything, like business, fitness, life. Like you should honestly always have a coach, always have a mentor. You should always be learning. And so that was like my ego talking of like, well, I'm going to look stupid in front of all these people. Who all these people were, no idea. But I was like, everyone's going to think I'm like dumb for having a coach, which is false. So I looked, and the first thing on her page, it said RN. And like, I was like, oh my God, she's a nurse. She knows my schedule. She knows my like shit show craziness that happens all the time. Yet she's yoked. I was like, she's jacked. Why? What is this? And I was like, so it's possible for someone to have my career and have like the body, the goals that they want. And like literally, that is all I did not stalk her page. I did not anything. Like I saw the bio, and I was like, okay, we're going to do it. I was like, because this is a Hail Mary at this point. Like I've tried everything else. And I want to backtrack just a hot second, because when I was trying to like train myself as like a personal trainer and training my clients, and when I was seeing no results, and when I was in my negative cycle with food, that also led me to then try every single fad diet. Like I tried Optavia, where you're eating, like my quote unquote coach at the time was like, yeah, you probably shouldn't work out while you're doing this program. And I was like, why? And she didn't say, she's like, it's just, you know, it's just probably just better. And I was like, why? And now in retrospect, it's because on Optavia, you're eating like 800 calories a day. Like
Wow.
you don't have the energy to work out. It's like dangerous to work out. So I tried all those quick fixes. I tried the green tea. I tried the pills. I tried like literally the booty cream that you rub on yourself, everything. I was like, if it's out there on the market, like I was one of those people. And so I did all the things, and I was like, great, it's still not working. And what that solidified in my brain was that like, oh, I can't do it. Like I'm never going to get to my goals. It's not possible for me. Like that's where it led me. That was my conclusion. So when I looked on Dayla's page and I saw that was the first kind of like little shred of light where I was like, oh, you know, maybe this is possible, right? So I clicked on the link. I literally got on a phone call with whoever the guy was, the sales guy at this time. I just like, we were on the phone for like an hour and a half. I was like, I've tried everything and like all this stuff. And poor man, he was literally so great. Like he was like, you know, I'm not going to force you, but it sounds like, yeah, you're right. This is your Hail Mary. He's like, worst case scenario, you try it for 3 months. If you hate it, don't resign. He's like, I don't care, like whatever. And so I was like, okay. So I signed on, and that was literally, I was put on the new coach at the time, which was Malia. So I was like one of her first clients. And that's how I like ended up joining DLD. And so again, fast forwarding, now I've been on the team for what, 2.5 years.
Yes.
Uh,
I'm
so
gonna pause you real quick.
yeah,
So we've I just want to touch on some of the things that you encapsulated in that. This is how I got to DLD, and I really appreciate you telling that story, because I'm sure you told me at some point, but I didn't even remember the Accutane part. And my best friend in LA, who we were just talking about, like, he did Accutane, and we're in high school, and he's just like, bro, like, I can't take it. And I'm like, I'm definitely not doing that. Like, it's not worth it. And that journey leading you to where you are now, which I think in hindsight you could be like, oh, hey, thanks Accutane, like, kind of helped out.
yes,
But also the journey that so many of us take in so far as the quick fixes, the horrible things that you see in a magazine cover that's like, it's November 1st, lose 50 pounds before Thanksgiving. It's like, no, that's not going to happen.
absurd, yeah.
But we all get drawn into that. And almost to a point of desperation, you're like, okay, I got to try something else. And to your point, you're like, oh, I see this nurse, and it's really cool that you vibed with Dela being an RN. However, what's funny is you didn't see you saw that tip of the iceberg, but what you didn't see was Dela trying all of these other fad diets and quick fixes with her journey. Like, she had a hashtag called #Keto Chronicles. And it was like when she was on keto, trying to make that work. And she goes back and looks at herself and she's like, oh my God, like, what was I doing? I was so unhealthy. Like, thankfully I found God. And what I mean by that is like tracking macros, eating healthy, like not starving ourselves. And then you find her like, 3 or 4 years into her journey. And it's like, oh my God. Right. And last thing I want to say is the mentorship component, the coaching component. The reason why it's so important, if you're listening, is you have somebody who shows you what's possible. So Kailin, through our amazing coach Holly, which I did not know that you guys grew up together. Holly recommending like, hey, check out Dela. You connected with her on that RN piece and saw her as, oh, if she can do it, ... I can do it, because I know all nurses have to start night shift. I know all nurses have a crazy schedule. I know all nurses, right? And so if she can do it, I can do it. And that's the benefit of mentorship. That's the benefit of coaching. So I just wanted to kind of touch on some of the amazing things you were talking about, Kailin. So getting back to your story, you came in because of those reasons, which I think are the reasons most of us start. And you've heard me say this on Mindset Sport Calls, which we'll get into in a sec, but most of us have the aesthetic goals, or I want to look good for this event, or I've picked up some extra pounds through school, through working. I want to get that off. And that's typically when most people hire a coach and start with DLDNation. So you come in through that, and then fast forward and take it away.
Fast forward, yeah. So I came in with those aesthetic goals. I was like so set on losing the 20 pounds that I gained. Like, that was a number in my head. I was like, I gotta get back to where I was, blah, blah, blah. And now 2.5 years later, like, and we talk about this all the time. Fitness is such a mental game. It's not just physical. It's not just about being in the gym. It's not just about nutrition. It like becomes this whole like inner self piece and mindset piece. And so now my goal is to like be as strong as I can effing be. I want my body like curved, like carved out. Like, I want to see the muscles that I built, what I worked for. And this draws parallels to life. So like, not only do I want to be strong in the gym, but that has made me be so much stronger in life. I tackle heavier things now in life. I like go after more things. I'm more courageous, because like when you get comfortable in the gym or out of your comfort zone in the gym, then it translates into life of like, oh, well, if I can like lift that heavy piece of metal off the ground, well, what can I do over here, like at work? What can I do over here towards my dreams of life? So now the goal is more broad. It's just like, what can I tackle next? That's the goal.
And I'm sure we'll get into it, but even going so far as to try these dance classes that you've tried while you've been in New York, and then succeeding in that, having people shout you out and be like, oh my God, like, this is your first class, and having the, I guess, confidence, the self-efficacy, if you will, because the self-efficacy, we build on it. And so having that to be able to try new challenging things. And people listening, I've talked about it on this podcast ad nauseum before, but a fitness journey is really a self-love journey. And when we start accomplishing things in the gym and at home, we poke our heads up and we're like, oh, wow, I just dominated this goal. Where else can I find this? Like, can I improve, like you said, my career, my relationship, my personal life? Like, what does that look like? And the point of getting outside of your comfort zone and doing hard things, because then all of a sudden everything else seems a lot easier. Because I didn't realize this at the time, but when I was growing up as a competitive swimmer, getting in a pool at 5:30 in the morning, once I went through college, even the collegiate swimmers I was with, they were like, man, if you can do this, like, everything's going to be so easy. And it's funny, when Dayla and I go through the challenges we do now as adults and as married people, I look back on swimming all the time and I'm like, well, I did that hard thing. Like that was hard and I did that, succeeded at that. So finding strength in that. And so it's really cool that fitness can be that for so many people. I know you and I are going to get around to it, so I want to just rip the Band-Aid off. Mindset support. So you joined in 2020, right before the pandemic. And then because we noticed that all of our clients needed more support outside of like fitness and nutrition, we decided to start offering this free call on Thursdays to every client. And we would just talk about life and talk about the fitness wins, the questions, the challenges that we all go through. You started coming to those and you are a recurring at this point guest host. I can't tell you how many times Spencer and I trade messages and we're like, hey bro, like, can you cover for me tonight or whatever? And one of us will be like, oh, Kailin's on, you know? All the co-hosts. So what inspired you? What motivated you to attend that call? Because it is something on your free time. It could be, what are these people doing? But you dove in. Why was that?
Oh my God. So I could literally gush about mindset for years to come. So it's funny, and I love that we're going to get into this topic right now because I want to shed some light that I actually don't even know if you know. But so I have been into personal development a very long time. That piece, you know. I'm 27 now, but I got into it around 21, 22. I had graduated. I became a nurse at 21. I've always been the youngest in my class. And I was like in my first year of nursing, loving it. But then there was this piece of me that was like, it was like an itching, a scratching, like, and that's the only way I can describe it. It was like this gnawing that like I was meant to do more. Like, Kailin, you're meant to do more, not instead of nursing, but like in addition to, alongside of it. Like there's something more that you haven't seen yet that like you're supposed to be doing. And it's funny because on my, so I'm a big travel bug. But that started right around 21. I went on a solo trip to Portugal and I was kind of late to the airport and I realized I had forgot my book. It was about to be a really long flight. So I went to like the airport, bookshop, and I had to make a quick decision. The flight was going to take off soon. I saw this book with like a bright yellow cover and it said, "You Are a Badass." And I was like, oh, like giggled. And I was like, great, I'm going to, pick that one up and we're going to go. I had no idea it was a personal development book. I was just like, I like the cover.
You're like, I'm a badass. That sounds great.
I'm a badass.
I'm gonna grab that. Yeah, I'm going to Portugal.
Yeah. And so I read this book and I low key was like kind of hyped up. I was like, ooh, it's like saying nice things about me and myself, like teaching me how to talk better to myself. And of course, because the government's watching you over your cell phones, I came back home and first thing I saw was like a Facebook ad. For a book called High Performance Habits by Brendan Burchard, who is my OG personal development guy. I love him. And it was a free book. You just had to pay shipping. Best $7.95 I ever spent. So I ordered this book and I just got introduced to this world of self-help, of personal development. And he was talking about how to be a high performer and that there's this world where you don't have to go to your 9 to 5 if you hate it. You don't have to do things in life that like people dump on you. Like if you have something like a dream or whatever, a gnawing inside of you that like says you're supposed to do more, let's lean into that. And he's so practical about it. He's like, he studies successful people. So he's like, how do they get successful? They didn't just walk out of the womb successful, right? So like, what are they doing that made them that way? And it comes down to your habits, and habits are something you have complete control over. So he's like, how do you perform well in your habits? And he's like, once you start to take that step, then what door does that open? And then and it's just like, it was this whole world and this whole like language I was getting into where I was like, the world is huge. There's so many opportunities, so much possibility. Like I was infatuated. And so I'm 22. All my friends are like out partying, drinking, like all this stuff. I had no one to like talk to about this new stuff I was trying to figure out or stumble into. And I remember I ended up like pulling a couple of my close friends aside. And I was like, listen, I was like, because once I started reading Brendan's book, then I started listening to his podcast and I started listening to Tony Robbins, then this, then Brene Brown, then it's just, floodgates open. And I was like, I don't know what I'm getting into, but I don't want to stop. And I was like, I'm going to be pulling back maybe from going out so much. Like, I'm still here for you. We're still besties. But I was like, I want to dive into this. I want to make myself better. Like, I want to go down this path, even though I don't really know what it is yet. And I was like, so I'm just going to be pulling back a little bit. I just want to let you know. And they were like, okay, cool. Like, they didn't really understand what I was saying, but they were like, you go, girl. Like, go ahead, do it. And so by that time, now I'm starting to join DLD, having been in this personal development world for like a year. And when we had the mindset call, I didn't know what it was. Like, I just joined. I was like, yeah, I'm in COVID too. I'm a travel nurse out here, like traveling the US during COVID, And so I was like, I can use a little mindset support. And when I got on the call, that was like my first real interaction with you. And the part that I want to like shed some light on for you is that as soon as you opened your mouth, you started like speaking the language that I had been like reading about. And I was like, he knows.
I found a disciple.
Yeah. I was like, he's saying the things that like I'm like starting to get into. He's like speaking the language. He's awake. Like, his head is not down in the crowd, like whatever. I was like, he's poked up, like looking around. And I was like, oh my God. So I started like freaking out. And if you remember, I DM'd you right after that first call. And I was like, just want to let you know, like, I really resonated with what you were saying. Like, thanks, you're dope, like this. And you were like, yeah, cool, awesome. Like, that was great. And I was like, no, he is now my mentor, whether he likes it or not. Like, I was like, and it was immediate. So I was like, this guy's reading the same book. He's just a few chapters ahead, like, and so I was like, I have a lot to learn from this dude. And so like from that very first call, I was like, bye, this is now my Thursday night. So
I appreciate
it's like not
it.
an offer. Yeah.
Yeah. That was such a huge help too when you DM'd me, because we were just throwing stuff against the wall. And I was like, I hope this helps people, because, and I think this, Kailin, but just for those listening, our average at the time voice memo response times to clients was like anywhere between 3 and 6 minutes. And for all the coaches on the team at that time, it was all above 10 minutes. And of course, we're a fitness and nutrition coaching company. And of course, clients were bringing the issues from the pandemic to their check-ins. And so Dayla and I looked around and I was like, okay, I think if we have like a Zoom and then tell everybody like, hey, try to use your fitness and nutrition coach for fitness and nutrition. And then if you have these other questions related to the pandemic, we all need help. Like, let's come hang out on a Zoom. Like, I even think Dayla and I did a wine night once and we got, I want to say like 80, 90, 100 people, because people didn't have anything to do. And they were like, hell yeah, I'm down to get a little tipsy and just like talk about what's going on and share some things that are working for us. And so I really appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate you jumping into the call and also starting your personal development journey so early. That's something that I don't have regrets per se in life. I wish I would have gotten into it a little bit sooner. I'm still very grateful for the time that I got into it, but you and I were just talking about my mentee, Rob, who's 24, and I've been doing the same thing. Like, all the books I've been reading that you can see sort of behind me that I've read, I'm sending to him. And I'm like, because he's a huge Kobe Bryant fan. Kobe's big into the Mamba mentality. And I was like, bro, this is the Mamba mentality for life. I was like, if you start reading these books and start putting these things into play at 24 and you do it every week, every month, every year, I was like, dude, imagine we're going to be at 27, 28, 29, 30, and so far ahead of the people who are not doing it. That's something else I wanted to come around to for anybody who's listening to this, who's, let's say, like 25, 26 and younger, and you're like Kailin and you're like, oh my God, I read High Performance Habits too. And oh my God, like I'm into personal development and ... My friends don't really get it. That is wholly normal. I would say, and you probably agree, Kailin, that at a young age, like you said, you were kind of different from the herd. And you had this like, oh, I'm getting into this over here. Like, I don't want to party so much. That's something I hear across the board. Like Hannah on our team, amazing coach, when she was a client of mine, same kind of thing. Like, she was going through that same journey of, I think I kind of want to go over here versus like continuing to do the same stuff I was doing in college. Dayla's youngest brother, Dex, so I've shouted out a ton. He works at Uchiko. He's a sushi chef. When you're in Austin, hit it up. Anybody who's in Austin, it's the best sushi spot in town. He's 26 and he's kind of there too. And he's been working at Uchiko for a year. He's now able to save some money. He's seeing success in his job. He really enjoys it. And then he'll go on a date with like a 24-year-old and he's like, yeah, they're all over the place. Like they just want to party. Like they never get back to me. And when they do, they just want to, go out and drink and stuff. And my refrain to him is like, hey, just focus on yourself for like a couple more years, like 2 or 3 more years. And you get to be 28, 29, 30 and poke your head up. And there's going to be women who appreciate that and vice versa. Like, I've talked to women in a life coaching capacity, and I'm like, yeah, they're in that fuckboy stage, pardon my French, of, 20 to 25 and something. And then as people get older, they really start to mature. So I appreciate you diving into the personal development, trusting us in mindset, and hanging around. So why did you hang around in mindset support so long? Because you already kind of had it. Like you said, you recognized that I was speaking a similar language. And then you still, like I said, are a recurring guest host at this point. So what kind of kept you around?
Yeah. So in the beginning, it was just like, I was just on information download, like times a million. Like I was just like, every mindset call, I would learn something, everything. Like I was like, oh my God, I couldn't get enough. I was like, we should have mindset more often. It shouldn't just be once a week. But so and that continued for like a full year, like a year and a half. Like I was like, I know I'm about to learn some shit here. So like, let's like have my notebook out, let's be ready. Or like because obviously life is always ever evolving, so new challenges come up. So if I have questions like, how do people deal with this? So not only am I absorbing how to kind of like deal with other people's problems who have questions, but then when I stumble upon something like, hey, I wasn't ready for this, I don't know, I can bring it and then even absorb more. And now it's continuing to like water the plants. Like I need my weekly dose of mindset because it helps keep me grounded, and it helps, like, my motto in life is like, you should always be learning. There's something every day you can learn something that's new. You can learn multiple things that's new every day. But like, if you get to the point where you're like, no, I have this, and then close yourself off to learning, you're regressing a little bit, because you just don't know everything. There's so much information you don't know. And so I think that there's a quote that literally says, the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And so that's why I always come to mindset. And it's just such a like good, feel good day of the week, because not only are you going to benefit positively from it, but then you're about to make someone else feel good, and that's going to benefit you twofold, So it's just like, it's an addiction.
It is a good addiction. It is so funny that you mentioned, Kailin, finishing the call and feeling really good, because also we hold these calls for free for DLDNation clients, shameless plug for those listening, at 7 p.m. Central. So that's 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. And so it is a little bit later in the day. And we've workshopped and A/B tested different times, and that was the time that seemed to work for everybody. And there's so many times, Kailin, where I'm like just super busy, I'm stressed, I'm doing something, I'm running late, and I'm like, oh God, like now I need to hop on mindset. And then I finished and I'm like, oh, that was so great. Like it was amazing connecting with everybody. It really reinforces all of those things that we're working on. Like even you recently with your exercise and getting out of your comfort zone again with dance, like, the answers, and you came to mindset being like, yeah, so I kind of know the answers, but I need somebody to back me up. I need reinforcement. And everybody's saying like, yeah, you're getting out of your comfort zone, like do it, and it's like, okay, cool. Whoo, like, whoo, off the forehead, like, okay, I'm on the right track. And it's really nice to have that support that we all need. And I found the same thing with my own sort of personal development practice, is it helps to reinforce certain things. I mean, that's why I wrote this book. Like this was all from mindset, and it was just like regurgitating that. And it's really cool to have it over and over, just to be drummed into my head. I really appreciate that ability. I did want to ask, coming back around to that gnawing feeling that you mentioned. So do you still have that gnawing feeling? And if you do, how do you manage it now? Or like, what does that gnawing feeling mean to you now versus when you were in your early 20s?
Yeah. So I'm like very into listening to your body now, like listening to my inside. So I'm a big fan of Oprah. Who doesn't love Oprah? But she has a great podcast called Super Soul Sunday, which I'm a huge fan of. And she gets really into life and spirituality, and like, she believes like everyone has a purpose, everyone has a calling, And if you haven't listened to her podcast, like that is one of the most highly recommended podcasts that like I can push on to you guys. Like I feel like she just opens up a whole new perspective of life, and it makes sense what she's saying. But she says life speaks to you in whispers, and if you don't listen to the whispers, then it's gonna like throw a rock, and then if you don't listen to the rock, it's gonna throw a brick, and then like you have to start listening to these things.
That escalates real quick.
Yeah.
Whisper,
So
a brick through the window, like, guys, can I get something in between?
And you're like, oh shit. So but like think about it, like when you can compare that in any context, like if you think like, oh, I need to get more fit because I feel like, just not even from an aesthetic fit standpoint, but like I know I'm kind of unhealthy, then that's the whisper, is like that thought. And then if you ignore it and you keep eating your McDonald's 7 times a day and you keep doing this, then like, okay, well, next is like, what if I like gain a whole bunch of weight? That's maybe the rock. And then next is like, oh, what if I have a heart attack? Like that's the brick. Like your life is going to be speaking to you. And so what I've tried to do is listen to it the first time. You listen to the whisper, even if you like, don't wait for it to be the house falling down. Listen when you first get that little intuition, if you will, of like, maybe I should follow that. So the gnawing, I didn't have like the language to really know what that gnawing was in the first place. And I think the gnawing is a lot quieter now. And I feel like that means it's because I'm going in the right direction. It's because I'm listening to things the first time. So I'll get that gnawing, or I'll get that feeling, or I'll get that thought. And then I'll just be like, fuck it, let's do it. And then it's like, ooh, it quiets right away. So it's like, that's almost like that meter where I can gauge, like, is this right or is this wrong? And it takes practice, but like, you'll build these reps of like, is this the right direction? Yes or no. And if you notice that like thing gets a little louder and you're like, oh, maybe not. Like, so you kind of have to gauge it for yourself. But the first thing was, I was a nurse and I then was getting into personal development. And so that was like feeding my gnawing of like, oh, okay, I'm stepping into something here. And then it was, I was going to figure out how to continue my education. And it was either kind of to go and be a nurse practitioner eventually, or do something else. And I was like, I don't think I want to be an NP. And that's when I had like taken the time to really think like, oh, it's med school. And then that gnawing quieted down. I was like, oh, I really like, the more I dive into healthcare as a travel nurse, the more I love it. The more I see different units, the more I love it. And I'm just like, I just want to be in this nitty gritty. And I know healthcare is like one of the veins that makes up Kailin. Like there's like a couple of things. There's like 4. It's literally healthcare, fitness, Lucky, my dog, and like the color pink. Like that's like Kailin in a nutshell. And so, and dance. Ooh, that's a good one too.
And the rock.
And the rock. Oh my God, yes. So there's a couple of veins, but they're pretty simple, And it's like, I can just tell like the feeling I get when I make that decision. I'm like, oh, this is really good. And then I'll do the research behind it. And then I'll be like, confirmed. Like, yes, this is good. So it's a lot quieter now because I feel like I'm getting in the flow. And so another recent example, like we were talking about, is travel nursing right now in New York. Being in New York, I had this huge gnawing that I wanted to dance again. So for those who don't know, I was a competitive hip hop dancer for 10 years. And when I did it all throughout high school and college, and then when I graduated college, I was like, ooh, it's really hard to become a professional dancer. So I know I love nursing. I decided that a very long time ago, like I'm going to be a nurse, and I'm very happy with that right now. But being in New York, which is such a big hub for dancing, my creative side literally started like banging on the door. It was like, nope, time to dance. Like travel nursing is always going to be there. It's not like my license are expiring, like nothing is happening. Nursing is just going to have to be paused because I want to dance. And so I was here for like a month maybe when that like gnawing got so loud. And I was like, okay. And then I would get to the studio and it would be silent because I was in flow. I was doing it. And I was like, oh my God, like that. And I would just have such a rush afterwards. And I was like, this is it. And so I made the decision, I'm going to pause nursing right now so I can hardcore go into like a maybe pre-professional track for dance and like just like live life. And shout out to Mindset, because I brought that to Mindset. I was like, I don't know. And you guys were like, what's 6 months? Take it. Let's fucking go. Worst case scenario, you had your fill, you go back to nursing and like you're good. Best case scenario, you become a professional dancer. Bye. So it's like you have to listen to that gnawing to kind of point you like where you need to go.
So that whisper you were talking about, do you have practices or strategies for more acutely listening to that whisper? And I think you know where I'm going with this question, because I think for people listening, and just to unpack real quick, there's the voice that's like, you suck. And it's typically the louder voice. And that's the one that we all kind of have really loud in our heads. That's the one not to listen to. Like if you think about the two coaches or two teachers or two family members, relatives that you have in your life. And the one person who's always negative, that voice is going to be louder. And then there's the person that's like, hey, you can do this. Like, you got that. That's that whisper voice that I think Kailin's talking about. So what have you done? What practices do you have in your life to amplify that whisper?
A huge one is meditation, like huge, huge, huge. And I highly recommend another podcast. Deepak Chopra is a doctor, but he's also a very big spiritual leader. So I'm super into him. He on Spotify has this 21-day like guided meditation. And I think it's perfect for beginners and not beginners alike. The meditation portion is actually only like 5 minutes itself, but he spends each episode is only like 15 minutes. He spends the first 10 talking logically about what we're about to meditate on. And it just like, again, what he says makes so much sense. And it's very like bite size. It's very easy to like digest. And then you do your meditation for 5 minutes and then you come out and you're like, oh, that's great. And then you do it again the next day. So it's a 21-day like stretch. And honestly, I've just been starting it over and I just keep going. I just like do it again. So when you can quiet your mind, you notice like something will come up and come out. And it's that inner knowing, if you will, your higher self, the universe, God, energy, whatever you want to call it, like it is there inside. Everyone has it. Everyone has it. And we just get so used to not listening to it because there's always that louder voice that's overpowering or that's negative or that's this or that leading you in whatever direction. But when you can get quiet, and this is not like Buddha type level, this is like just for your couple seconds when you just stop, because we're always going. If you just stop, that's why people don't like to sit with themselves because they're like, oh, I don't know what's in there. I don't want to look in the mirror, you know? When you do that, that's the only way that you can start to even recognize what that voice sounds like or how that voice talks to you in your own specific body. Another thing I did too was I read a book called Claim Your Power by Mastin Kipp. And it's a book to help you work through trauma, actually. And he said, I want you to sit with yourself and ask your heart what a yes feels like. He's like, you have to ask a couple times, do it in a space you feel safe. Don't do it with like your roommate sitting right next to you, you know, be by yourself. Ask your body, ask your heart, what does a yes feel like? And ask it a couple times until you get that feeling. And then you know what that sounds like. And then you ask, what does a no feel like? And then you listen for that. And it doesn't like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's not the same for everybody. Like you have to get so in tune with yourself that like you then have a shorthand with yourself of like, oh, I know this is right. I know this is wrong. And so for me, my yes feeling is like, it literally comes from like the center of my chest and it just swells. And I just get like this, like that is like expansion. Like, you know, those little like plastic balls that you like, they're spiky and you expand them or whatever. Have you ever seen those?
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, okay, all right.
If I had a visual, I'd probably get it.
It's like they were popular when we were like kids. It's like it starts in this little spiky ball and then you pull out the sides and it expands. And so, but that's like what mine is. Or you can think of like a little energy ball of just like expansion. That's me. And it starts in the center of my chest and it grows. And then a no feels like a dud. Like I literally like, it's just like a down tick. And I can feel that. And that makes sense to me. It might not make sense to you, but like that's what mine is. And so now when I am in the hubbub of New York City, I can still hear those things because I'm accustomed to, I already got on the same page with myself. So I can then more quickly navigate situations and like kind of listen to those whispers of like, oh, this is a yes, let's go for it. Or this is not.
You've gotten the practice in and you get those reps in, and anybody listening, it's not going to happen overnight. Like I remember when I started my meditation practice like 11, 12 years ago now, it was a lot harder than it is now. And I can tap in and not think, which is super cool. And if I do have a thought, I can very quickly get back to my meditation, where 5 years ago, that was not the case. I also would agree with you, Kailin, as far as how I feel going. Like, I really loved how you were saying expansiveness, and you and I could get woo-woo and like go deep down a rabbit hole on that one. However, the other way, going the other way was how I started to kind of pay more attention to it. Because anytime there was a no, or like, I don't know about this, I would feel really constricted and restricted and like getting smaller in my chest. And I feel like a pain in my chest. I'm like, oh, I don't know about this. And then as I have the opposite of that, because I'm like, well, I know what that feels like, and that's horrible, and I don't like that. And so what's the opposite of that? And it's really just that freedom, and like, oh, I don't feel a tightness in my chest, I don't feel a weight on my shoulders. This must be the path forward. I, like you, huge fan of meditation. I would also argue that exercise, the food we're eating, what we're drinking, being outside, who we're around, like that can all help support it as well. And it's one of those things that I would agree with you. Like Deepak Chopra was really helpful for me when I got divorced back in 2015. I read some books of his and I was like, man, this guy makes a lot of sense. And so I really appreciate that you brought him up, and that endless, like you and I've talked about before, I have a tattoo on me, which is Ancora Imparo, which is apparently what Michelangelo, the painter, not the turtle, said upon his deathbed when someone asked, how are you doing? Like, what's going on, bro? And he said, and yet I'm still learning, i.e. like, I haven't felt this, like dying. I haven't felt what dying feels like as a human. Like, this is new. And like, it can be beautiful, right? Because I get to experience it. It's me, like no one else gets to do this. And that's, to me, personal development. That's, to me, always learning. Because when thankfully I surround myself with people like yourself, but occasionally if I meet someone who's like, oh, I don't need to learn that, I'm just like, okay, then why not die? Like,
Yeah,
like what's
yeah.
left, you know? Like, oh, you know everything, like, oh, you beat the level, like you're done,
Yeah,
you know?
gotta go.
Versus the person who's always constantly learning. And then, like you said, it's the adage of you know, the wise man knows nothing, and like the wise person, they're just like, I don't fucking know, you know. But
Yeah.
you don't get there unless you go on that path. Kind of a fun question, were you a big Jabberwockies fan? Did you watch America's Best Dance Crew?
Yes. Wait, what? This is caught off guard.
Yeah,
Love
how have we not gone on this one before?
Yeah, shoot. Oh my God.
So yeah, so you like the Jabberwockies, and they just crushed. I remember watching ABC religiously.
Yeah, I literally, so it's funny because like, so being a competitive hip hop dancer, like I started when I was like this like 13-year-old girl, and I was just like listening to rap, and I was like, this makes me feel some type of way. Like, I like this. And I like tried out I'd never taken a dance class. I was in 8th grade, and I was like, I just like how this makes me feel. This was me listening to The Whisper without even knowing it, by the way. I was like, this makes me feel like a yes. Like, I was like, oh, okay. And so I tried out for this competitive dance team, and I made it on my first try. And like, from there, just like all throughout college, I was like, or all throughout life, I'm still there now. I just love it. Like, it makes my insides just like spark. Like, I love it. And so watching really good dancers and dances like brings me to tears. Like, I just love it. So I remember I would watch the Jabberwockies, and I was like, oh my God, how do they move like that? Like, this is amazing. So yeah, all those dance shows, I was just like, dang, this is wild.
So I used to have a Jabberwocky mask signed by all of the Jabberwockies, and it said "To Sean" on the mask.
Wild. Oh my God. Where's the mask now? Did you throw it away?
Yeah, because I wore it one night and Dayla got scared, and she was like, I don't want that in the house. And we had like a 500 square foot apartment. It was a dark day. It was raining outside, and I was just like messing around. And she was like, I've never seen that. I never want to see that again. So I'm like, God
Your
damn it.
privileges. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's such a cool thing. It was like in 2010, I interned in LA, and I very briefly like dated a girl whose aunt, I think, was a producer on the show. And I just mentioned how big of a fan I was. And I'm like, oh, it's super cool. And then one day we went to dinner, and she was like, hey, I got you this. And it was this mask that was signed, yeah, by everybody, to Sean. Yeah, it was such a great gift.
Absolutely wild.
That was like, for length of a relationship, value of gift, and impact of gift. Like, definitely Hall of Fame there for like, it was a 3-month thing, and the gift was very impactful.
Yes, that's like me like saying one time, oh, I really like Chris Evans, which, shout out if you're listening. Love you.
Yeah, Chris Evans, avid
like,
Shots to the Dome listener.
Yeah. And then just like someone like bringing me right to his doorstep, like, oh yeah, I know Chris. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, he lives down the street. Here, introduce you to my friend.
He's your neighbor.
Man, that's great. Well, Kailin, I appreciate you dropping so much knowledge. You know, I went into this as, I think, you know, like, oh, a client interview, and we are talking about how great DLD is. And like, I think we touched on that a little bit, but you being able to share your journey, what's helped, and the tactics and strategies that you've used, your perspective on things, I know is going to be really, really helpful. As we sort of get to the end of this and coming back around to the client interview aspect of it, there's a question I ask everybody I have on the show who's a client in DLDNation. What would you say to someone who's listening right now and being like, oh, I've heard about Dayla, I've heard about the team, like I've heard about DLD, I don't know. What would you say to that person?
You're never gonna know unless you try. So it's honestly, there's no risk to it, because worst case scenario, you tried something and you learned a few healthy habits and then, okay, you don't stick with it. Like best case scenario, you change your whole fucking life. Like, and this is a piece that I wanted to touch on while we were here is when I came into this, like I came into DLD, like we said, kind of with the same expectations. I just want to lose weight. Um, but I was in such a negative space with myself, with food, with my body, with everything. And I remember, I'm gonna try not to get emotional when I talk about this, but
You can. We can totally edit it out, or we
we
can
can
keep it all
handle
in. It's all good.
it. So being Malia's client, like when I say Malia like changed my fucking life, like this is ew, I'm getting teary.
We've just cut out 5 to 10 minutes of crying. We've edited that out. We're now back.
And we're back. Yeah, so like I just remember I would come in and I would, have my weekly check-ins and I would be so down on myself. Like I would be like, I messed up again. I binge ate again, like I did all this stuff. I'm a piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. And like never once did she like come down on me. Like never once was she like, yeah, you kind of fucked that one up. Like, and I had some nasty check-ins. Like it was like I had some bad habits that were just solidified in my brain. And like to be met, like so I'm a type 3 Enneagram. And so I'm very achievement based, very like performance based. And so when I perform poorly, that correlates to like my self-worth, right? So like I would come into this check-in like head down, tail between my legs, and I would be like, I would almost answer her response for her. I was like, I know I fucked up, so like I'll try to do better next week, like this is that. And I would just be so like constantly like down. And she would never once slap me on the wrist, never once. And like even when I was like, this one is the time, this is gonna be it. Like she's
This is the
gonna
one.
yeah, this is the one. She would always find something good to like pick out and say about me. Like that honestly pure like love and like acceptance, regardless of how I performed, was like I had never experienced that before. And I think that's why so many people get stuck on a fitness journey, is because we're doing it in spite of our body instead of in honor of our body. And when you're constantly like, you suck, you can't do it, you messed up again, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's why I was stuck in that rut for so long, is because I was like, you gained another pound, you did this, like, look at that, you suck again. And your body doesn't respond to that. And your brain doesn't respond to that. And so for her to just be like, no matter what, she's like, you're an awesome human being. Like, you're a great, I was like, what? Like, I like didn't understand how she was always so like, just, I can compare it to like nurturing a plant. Like she would just give me sunshine and light and love and water. And like, that's the foundation she built for me. And so that's why this changed, like you said, into such a self-love journey, into such a mindset like flip, is that it's not really about like the body is a byproduct of what's happening on the inside. And so for her to have helped me build that foundation of like, I am loved no matter what, I am accepted even if I fail, regardless of my performance, I'm already accepted. When you have that foundation, like that's dangerous. That becomes such a like fantastic springboard for you to jump off of. When you are like, it doesn't matter if I fail because I'm still worth it, then like you don't care if you fail. You're like, great, just found a way that didn't work. Let's try it again. Because you already, you're not based off of if you do good or bad, because everybody is going to fail at some point. Everyone should fail. That's how you move forward. But like that then doesn't deem what type of person you are, like what your character is because you failed. You're not a failure, so you don't identify with that. You identify with, oh, I'm loved, I'm accepted, this is cool, let's go. It's like such an uptick on life. And like that is what DLD helped me with. So like it's not even about like the actual physical fitness. It's about my whole insides changed, which allowed me to change everything on the outside. And so there's just nothing that compares to that. So if you're questioning about joining, don't. Bye. Like there's no other way to say it. Like you can really only benefit.
That was beautiful. And thank you for your vulnerability. Shout out Brene Brown. I also appreciate when I say like power vulnerability on mindset, you're like, okay, Sean, read the Brene Brown quotes.
It's like, don't come at me.
Yeah, that was great. I love how that basically tied this whole episode together. So thank you. Also, shout out to Malia, new mom Malia, who's still on maternity leave, but she'll be back soon. I'm going to send her a message as soon as we're done recording and telling her how awesome she is as a coach and how emotional her clients get in the best way. I appreciate you sharing your story, Kailin. Are you open to people connecting with you, finding you, like connecting with you on Instagram?
Duh. Yes.
Okay, so where can they do that? How can they connect with you?
My Instagram is Nurse Kailin. My name is spelled Kailin. There's no T in there, just so you know.
Thank you for that. We will have that in the show notes as well. Nurse Kailin. Well, thank you again. This has been awesome. It's been fun to just hang out with you and like play mindset and personal development ping pong.
Yes. Oh my God, this went by so fast.
Yeah. Well, hey, I smell another one in the hopper. I feel like we're going to have a part 2. Yeah. No, you're a great guest. Have you ever done podcasts before? Is this first one?
I actually have like just recorded like a couple episodes of like my own podcast, literally just like speaking on topics that like not to anyone specific. I'm just like, you know what, I've had this thought, and then recorded like a 15-minute podcast about it. So, but official podcast, yes.
Okay, so everybody stay tuned for Keeping Up with Kailin. I'm going to call it now. That's the new podcast. But hey, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.